across a narrow stairway, candlelight hotel, watch her from a window, rethinking his infatuation, clinging to his vision of her. As the red-lipped stranger downstairs, desk clerk, the cat slithers through the service entrance. Vampirite on a motorbike passes below to the westbound bridge. Werewolf on her back. Jennifer at Riverbend watches gunboats, smacks her foot on the bright red clay. She gives good lyric. She wrote this poem. She's no bomb. She's not there. On the other side of the greenish wall, through a 3-inch wall, here's the bed springs rattle, rustle and dry hump, some guys mumbles. Here's the fat white waitress, whip it and bondage, the sounds lull him to sleep. Hand of Uncle Sugar, still taking notes. Newsstand at Barrett, tell trophies to the winners. $1 trillion cash, flakes from the bomb. Gravity tears, pound of dust. Plays to a picture book, missing part of himself, perpetually anchored to an invisible erection. Lucky 7 lounge, she tries not to reveal herself, but she stubbornly clutches to her empty shoes. Something she's missing in the broad daylight, when the details are displayed, all that remains are a flat back hat, her oversized lantern, her broken laptop. Her broken laptop.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Minstrels on the Block. Very special guest, Mr. Will Dockery. So Will, now we've talked about your poetry and these really awesome books. Great ideas here. Now tell me how that morphed into your music.
It was sort of a gradual thing. It's basically, the Shadowville All-Stars thing is basically where it started, was coffee shop poetry around 95. We started hearing, there was sort of like a little rumblings. Playgrounds magazine, I guess, was a big influence, because that took the news to the hinterlands that something may be ready to happen, and some of us said, hey, something needs to happen, because there was a time Columbus was all cover bands, and if you didn't know the latest Aerosmith song or Hank Jr. or whatever, then you just couldn't perform on a stage, you certainly couldn't do poetry or, you know, juggling or, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, people that did balloon art, you know, different things like that. And open mics came along. Poetry readings at the Loft was very interesting. It's like 1995. I had gone through a divorce, so I started writing poetry and was kind of looking around at different places. And finally went to the Loft, started hanging out there. There was a place called Bizarre Earth, was very good. It's a coffee shop downtown. And I was seeing in the playgrounds that, hey, there's poetry readings on so-and-so, Tuesdays, I think. They had poetry on Tuesdays, open mic on Wednesdays at the Loft at that time. Which nowadays, of course, is Sports Rock Cafe. I'll throw them a Del Ranch. All of Phoenix City. That's where the action's at now. That's what's building now. It's Phoenix City, East Alabama is really where it's all happening now.
Cool side of the river.
Yeah, it's really, you know, it's worth the trip. You know?
Oh, definitely, yes.
There's more uncensored freedom over here than anywhere else, you know. But I went to check it out, and basically I started reading poetry, and the musicians were all over the place. Started meeting all kinds of musicians. Rick Edwards, Connolly, a lot of other folks. Rusty, I met him back in the late 90s. And I was up reading my poetry. It was like, you know, whatever, you know. It's like, and I was like reading out of my book or page, and yeah, I think it was Rick Edwards. Somebody said, "Hey, Will, you know, if you should, you know, instead of reading, you should start, you know, doing some stuff that could be recited." And basically, that's when I started. I said, "Well, you know, why don't you jump up with me? I'll get like a guitar player, a bongo, or whatever, and I would do poetry with a musical backing. A lot of it would be like improvised to sort of go with the flow of the music." And that was late 90s, and basically it just started solidifying. Basically, I was seeing that was where the real energy was the stage. And so it really went from a basis in like page, on the poetry on the page, to music. Started writing actual songs with guys like you and Connolly. And this is a collection of Shadowville Speedway. This is like some of the better stuff me and Henry Connolly have put together. And so basically it just developed more as, you know, as years went by, it just, you know, got tighter and tighter with musicians to the point where now it just seems sort of odd to get up and read a poem, even though I still write poetry. It's like, hey, I'll look at it and say, okay, what does this sound like? You know? So
Yes, yeah.
you got a melody there. You got your guitar. Throw it together. You know.
EAB. Yeah.
EAB. We got to copyright that. Okay. Shake and bake.
Right the hell on, brother.
Okay.
Now, your influences as far as your music, there were you've had some pretty heavy subject matters. Ozone Stigmata, one of my favorite songs of yours. That you want to tell me about those influences?
They're pretty big influences, and a lot of them different. Everything from, you know, guys like Lou Reed. I already mentioned Hank Williams.
Yeah.
It goes pretty wide range of musicians. Is that what you're talking about, or
that?
Or you talking about local people?
Well, no, actually, I was talking about your muse.
Oh yes, you're talking. Well, yeah. Probably my major muse would probably be the Ozone Stigmata or the Twilight Girl. That would be probably, you know, the Catherine. It's like, I think the Tired of Waiting, Some are born sweet delight, others are born to endless night, and that's one of the darker passages of the Shadowville thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
so the Shadowville.
Probably the music speaks really well for itself, and I think we probably got, you know, what you're talking about there. I think I'll just let the music speak for that, you know. So
completely understandable. So we got into, and when we interviewed John Phillips,
Great guy. Actually, no, John Phillips, he's on every track of this record. He's a man. We didn't know at the time he plays drums on every track at Larry Rose Studios. Another East Alabama, I don't know what the word is, but he's definitely...
John's everywhere. We're finishing up B.J. Holland's album.
We didn't know that he could play everything. Now we know that, throw John anything and he can play it. From accordion to harpsichord, I've seen him do it,
Yeah. He's talked about, in his interview, about how both my band, Renegade, and also the Shadowville All-Stars were really groundbreaking in that it really brought people together into these random band jams that produce bands. And I think that's a really important thing that you have done, that you, before me, were gathering people who had never played before to play together. And it has really stirred the music scene in Columbus.
Yeah, I think that's what I was, I may have been, it's a little early in the morning, maybe, the late 90s, early 2000, back like when I was going from just reading a poem on the stage to saying, hey, there's a bongo player, there's a violinist, whatever, there's a guitar player. Guitar always adds that structure. It's great to have a great guitar player, like yourself or Connolly, and get a great guitar player to just throw down a basic framing, and it's almost like it's been compared to building a house. And that's where like the Fountainhead. Howard Rourke was a big influence on me. It's like he's as you build the perfect building, or at least try to build an interesting building, and a song or a story or a poem or any work of art is like, constructing something that'll stand up for a while. Yeah. And I think we've done a few things that are going to stand up.
I definitely think
and like you're saying, like John may have been saying, I think he's talking about it, the random band concept.
Yeah.
It's basically, it still happens like as far as even last night. It's like, one of my favorite things to do is like, oh, Shadowville All-Stars, they're coming on. Okay, well, it's
Who's
like
in the room?
Doonanny last week. It was like, okay, I had you, and I had Rusty showing up. So
success.
Let's see if I find a couple of bongo player, a kazoo, just and try to get a weave of sound, a lush sound.
Yeah.
And that really goes back to when I was standing with the poetry, and I was like, hey, it'd be much more interesting up here if I just try to talk, pretty much. Room full of musicians on an open mic night, 5 or 6 of those to get up and somehow they work together. There are some train wrecks occasionally, but generally as the videos and the music, or even if you come down and see us sometime, you can see that generally somehow the people just weave and they work, and I think it has to do with a good basic structure of chord that people can follow with, and maybe some decent words, some content.
It is always a learning process. You've got, you do have your train wrecks, and then you have nights that are just golden, and that is what shapes and gets people stage ready. Really, it gives them experience in both the good and the bad, which, in the end, you have shaped the music scene in Columbus, and rock on.
And in honor of Rick Edwards, Uncle Grumpy, do the elbow.
After this, we'll be right back with some thoughts on the community, on the music scene in this area, and we will enjoy Shadowville.
Keep those cards and letters coming, folks.